I have a kind of a mantra, a framework that as I look back in my career and all my successes and failures, like the first step for any entrepreneur that's bootstrapping should just be do more, right? Like more hours, more emails, more tests, more. If you're trying to make money designing websites, all you need is more clients, right? It's relatively simple. You just do a lot more. Then eventually you refine, you get a little success and you have to refine and become more efficient so you can do better. And then, long into your career, you get to what's right, and you get to do right.
Let's discover the Cleveland entrepreneurial ecosystem. We are telling the stories of its entrepreneurs and those supporting them. Welcome to the Lay of the Land podcast, where we are exploring what people are building in Cleveland. I'm your host, Jeffrey Stern, and today we are headed a little bit south to Akron to learn about this week's guest, who is building what has now become one of North America's fastest growing companies in the last year. AC Evans is the co-founder and CEO of Drips, which is the first conversational texting company, forging an entirely new category of consumer engagement and leading the way for some of the biggest brands in the world to use automated, humanized conversations at scale. On a daily basis, Drips now engages in tens of millions of completely humanized conversations with zero client-side human resources or operators at play. Starting at the early age of 16, AC has been passionate about scaling the unscalable in all his business ventures, and Drips is no exception there, which we will dive much deeper to in our conversation. I very much enjoyed covering AC's vast experience in performance marketing and consumer conversion and retention and entrepreneurship, all while building Drips, a company with genuine multi-billion-dollar trajectory here. So please enjoy my conversation with AC Evans. So I was thinking about the best place to start this conversation, typically working chronologically, but it came across this idea that you are quite passionate about, this idea of scaling the unscalable. And I wanted to just kind of set the stage for the rest of the conversation by starting with what this idea means to you and where your passion for it kind of stems from originally. Sure.
I think I may have heard Gary Vaynerchuk or some other speaker, some other entrepreneur say it before I did. I don't pretend I made it up, but I think the thesis behind it is things that are difficult to scale are often very valuable if you can scale them, right? If you can figure out a way to have cars drive themselves, you have a Tesla, right? If you figure out a way to have a texting system hold human conversations, you have a company called Drips. Things that weren't scalable before, if you can figure out a way to scale them, then there's always value there, right? I think that's kind of the genesis of it was, that's where all the money is made or the efficiencies are had, is when you can have a force multiplier where you're able to scale the unscalable. You generally can disrupt some prior different methodology if you can do that.
Right. And because they are unscalable, they have less likely a chance to have been approached in the way that I think a lot of other problems come up. There's this corollary from another idea that I do not claim to have made up, but from Paul Graham, that he calls like the great schlep, that I think kind of speaks to some of that as well, where if you recognize those opportunities and you kind of can put in the willpower and just attention to solving really what seem like unscalable problems, there is a lot of opportunity with those.
And it's often too not the people that were the industry experts that do that, kind of out of the box, different methodology of scale. You just use Elon Musk, right? Like he wasn't necessarily a NASA engineer or into financial stuff before PayPal or into autonomous cars before Tesla. I think, at least in my opinion, oftentimes it's people that come from completely different industries that can think of the problem completely disparate and different. And they no longer think, okay, how do I make this car 5% better, 2% better, 12% better? They start to think of, how would I build a car if I didn't know anything about cars? How different would it be and could it be? And I don't know if you're a fan of Teslas at all, but they're one of my favorite analogies for this, because it's like nothing like a car. I mean, it looks like a car, and it, gets you from A to B like a car, but it's about as similar to a car as is to a horse and buggy.
Yeah, no, it kind of embodies that beginner's mindset, building up from the first principles of it rather than the way it's been done to date, and that iterative process instead.
Yeah.
Yeah. So where does your entrepreneurial interest come from?
It started fairly young for me. I always had a good work ethic. I mean, I think I had a job since I was 13 years old, pumping gas, washing dishes, cooking. Wasn't a terribly great student, wasn't a terribly great employee. And one of my friends who I actually moved in with, my first roommate, I think I was 17 or 18, he was into online marketing. And that was the first time I saw automation. He was like an email marketer essentially. And he had these systems where like the mice and the keys were literally moving on their own. And it just blew me away. I was like, what is going on here? And that's when I learned about automation and programming and VB back then, or VB6 or whatever it was, Visual Basics, and started teaching me how to build programs. And that's when I really started to get super interested in not being an employee, because this guy worked for himself forever. Mm-hmm. He had a Porsche 911 Carrera Turbo, whatever, as a senior in high school. He had an H1 Hummer, matching canary yellow, the Hummer and the Porsche. And, the big joke around town was he was like a drug dealer or whatever, but really he was just an online marketer. He was just like an online entrepreneur, just like many of the publishers and affiliates are today. And it just kind of blew me away. Like I came from humble beginnings. My parents never made a ton of money. I'd never made a ton of money. And, I think my first semester in college, I was doing night school, but I was clearing, 6 figures a year. So it was just like, what am I doing? Like, why, and I'm barely focusing on this, And back then it was a lot easier. There was not nearly as many people into online marketing or podcast type stuff, right? Or anything like that. But that was when it started.
Yeah. And just for my own curiosity and for folks listening, like when you're clearing 6 figures in college, what is online marketing? Like I have a sense for what that means, but like, what does that actually entail?
Yeah, it's newsletters and emails. And I mean, now we would call it spam, right? Like you get a thing, and it's whatever, what would it be? Like a dating website or, lose weight, with acai berries, or who knows what, what crap we were sending out at the time. But it was just, it's affiliate marketing, right? So like every company has it. Google has it, right? MSN had it. You can send people links to try to get them to buy something. And if they buy something, you get paid a referral, right? So that's how affiliate marketing publishers work. There's very legitimate ways to do it, all the way down to seriously illegitimate. We were definitely more of the legitimate side, where we do things compliant and send out to people that subscribe to newsletters, things like that. But yeah, that's essentially what it was solicitations over email, generally automated. You wouldn't be sending emails one by one by hand, right? You would be sending thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands per day to people that signed up to various different newsletters or websites that you created. That got me into, I built a lot of humor website, I guess would be the best way to say it. Like there's one, the site's still up. I don't own it anymore, but it's called customsouthparks.com. And it was a little site where you could create your own South Park characters. So you can give them like curly blonde hair and headphones and a microphone and, make your own little avatar. And that went super viral back in the MySpace days, back before anything went viral. There was no, right. There was no feed, there was no share buttons, but I built ways for people to share these things really easily amongst each other. And that was another example of scaling something that otherwise wouldn't be scalable. There was no way to save images out of Flash games, but I innovated a way to do that. So it's just another example of how you can get people kind of into funnels to sign up for stuff. Because when they try to save the image, I would say, hey, please fill out the survey. And that would be them opting in to get offers from, wireless phone carriers or cheaper internet, stuff like that.
Right. So as you're working through this, really just working for yourself in this context, right? Mm-hmm. At what point do you start to think about solving things more at scale from the perspective of building a business and maybe some of What were some of the original problems that you were identifying and starting to think about?
Yeah, it took a long time, candidly. I mean, I had probably more fun in my 20s than any three people I know. Again, I was getting used to this kind of online solopreneur, laptop nomad. I mean, I lived in Belize for some years. I traveled all around. I lived in Vegas. I lived in Myrtle Beach, and I wasn't really tethered or tied to anything. I just kind of built these projects. Now I call them money hacks. I realized back then I thought they were businesses, but they were really just arbitrage, projects. And not to say anything wrong with that. I mean, that's a great way to make a lifestyle living. Specifically, you got all your overhead super low. It's a high EBITDA business and whatnot. But I just wasn't thinking about growing a business or selling a company or raising money. It never even crossed my mind. I would just build something that made money, and it would kind of run until it didn't make money anymore, until something broke, the arbitrage broke, the model broke, and then I'd figure something else out. And that caused some really significant income years, and it caused some dire deficit income years, where I lost more money than I made. It wasn't honestly until I fell in love with my now wife, and I kind of woke up one day and realized, like, wow, I'm 31, 32 years old. I've made millions of dollars over my career. I have $0 to show for it. I have zero business to show for it. I have nothing that was, truly valuable or solving big problems. And that's when I got serious about, okay, I gotta try to build something that's lastable, that somebody else can run, that will go on, without necessarily, having to have it be an arbitrage type game, where you buy something for 5 cents and sell it for 25 cents.
Right.
Some of the early problems, built some networks. Again, there's a ton of automation behind this, but me and my co-founder, and our current CTO, we built some systems that would pair Amazon sellers with people that wanted free product, and they would get the free product and then write a review. Not necessarily a good review, but they would write, essentially long keyword rich reviews, which helps get your search engine ranking placements in Amazon higher up in the list. So it was all, very legitimate. I want to make sure I say that right, and above board. And that worked well. We built another system where we paired Facebook advertisers with Facebook people, so that the advertisers could run ads on their accounts and kind of spread their ads around. A lot of these big, kind of invite only networks, those were decent. We were also building Drips at the same time, and Drips was just kind of the project that really took off, and realized like it was, it could work across many verticals, solves really big problems. And that was right around the time where texting was like becoming way more ubiquitous and prevalent, and less people want to pick up their phones, right? Whether that's due to the prevalence of robodial or the preference of asynchronous conversations because everybody's busy. But that was the business that we effectively started, 100% focusing on in, I think, 2016.
When you were working through these, was there a higher level vision or thesis that you had kind of baked up coming into this, or was it really a matter of experimentation with different projects, trying to find one that had this extensibility and value and longevity to it?
Yeah, it's definitely the latter. I have a kind of a mantra, a framework that as I look back in my career and all my successes and failures, the first step for any entrepreneur that's bootstrapping should just be do more, right? Like more hours, more emails, more tests, more. If you're trying to make money designing websites, all you need is more clients, right? It's relatively simple. You just do a lot more. Then eventually you refine, you get a little success, and you have to refine and become more efficient so you can do better. And then, long into your career, you get to what's right, and you get to do right. So with Drips specifically, like, we're just getting into the do right phase. And we're working with some of the biggest companies in the world, many Fortune 100 companies. So no, I think a lot of entrepreneurs, they come in with their vision too baked in, and that causes a real rigidity, I'm a big person like the lean startup methodology and just MVPs and proof of concepts and whatnot. My career has helped me with that, but that's still how we operate. Like we prove stuff, test it, iterate, shift, adjust, pivot. We definitely have a mission statement. We have what we're trying to do long term and whatnot, but it's kind of like we know 4 years ago, we knew we were driving west. We didn't know if we were necessarily going to California or Nevada or where, and or when we'd stop or what we'd have to do to get there. But you eventually refine and refine and refine until you know exactly where you're going. But I think anybody that starts with the exact end in mind is set up for a lot of letdown, if nothing else.
Yeah, just building on that before we dive into Drips itself, just going back to the idea of the beginner's mindset and kind of building from first principles. If not a thesis that you kind of had originally going into it, it sounds like there was this extensive experience you had in the space and just like things that you had learned along the way. Did that, you feel like, give you these like earned secrets about the industry and a direction to work towards, or did you like challenge yourself in kind of the things that you had learned along the way?
Yeah, both. I think I leaned on the skill sets that I had, which was around a lot of automation, a lot of scaling to max scale with minimum resources. I always say what can be automated should be automated. But yeah, I mean, I learned a ton. I've read a lot of the books, right? I've followed a lot of different people. I've sought out mentors and CEO coaches and other CEOs and founders and learned from, groups. It's just kind of all the above. There's very few people that I'm aware of that, become very successful that did it all by themselves. I don't know if I know even one, right? Even if you're like barely successful, you generally probably had a lot of help along the way, whether you realize it or not.
Yeah. So let's talk about Drips for a moment, probably for the duration of the rest of the conversation here. So you mentioned some co-founders that you have. What did kind of the impetus for Drips look like?
Yeah, it was one of those things where a guy that my co-founder and I were working with in a different business, he had an online ad agency. So he would generate Facebook leads online for student loan consolidations back with the Obama, whatever the Student Loan Reform Act or whatever it was. So his company would generate, he would find people that need to get their student loan consolidated or forgiven, and then he would get those people on the phone and then sell those calls into debt forgiveness counselors or whatever it may be. So he had a system that was a CRM that would send a text message every day at noon that would say, "Hello, thanks for applying for, whatever it was, student loan relief. Please call us back at 888-555-1212 to get your student loans, reconfigured or whatever." That system broke one day, and he just told me, he's like, "Hey man, can you fix my system?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Well, my texter broke." And I said, "Well, I can't fix somebody else's software. That's not really, how software works." And it was, but anyway, long story short, I found out what it did exactly, and I rebuilt it. Essentially overnight, and I sent him, it was like maybe 3 a.m. the next morning or the next night, and I sent him a link, and I said, "Hey, when you're ready, open this link." And it was just a really long PHP script that would rerun itself every time you ran it. It would grab like 10 records or 100 records, whatever, and it would send that same text message out. So he calls me at 3 a.m. He's like, "Hey man, it's not working." And I said, "What's not working?" He said, "The link. I just clicked it. It just says refreshing. And I said, "Oh, dude, close that thing." And he closed it. And what he did, he already texted like, 2,000 people.
Oh, wow.
At 3 a.m., and he looked at his dashboard and his lines were all lit up, all these people on hold. Anyway, long story short, the next day he was up. He used to, prior to that, convert about 10% of his leads into calls. And with my script, he was converting 15% of his leads to calls. So it was a 50% increase in performance, which was just huge. It's a great increase. And he asked me, he said, "What did you do different?" And I said, "Well, your message was a little broadcasty, it was like, wasn't very humanized. So I changed the message to, hey, and then I put in the first name, hey, Jeffrey, thanks for finding us on Facebook." So I put in some recency there, some authority, some social proof. Like I'd already read all the marketing psychology books, as an email marketer. And so I put in all that contextually relevant information into the message. And it said like, "You can call me anytime until 8:00. Here's my number." And it was very humanized, and that got him a 50% increase in conversion. So long story short, he was like, "Great, what else can we do?" So I started changing the messages, so first day at noon, it would send a message. Next morning at 10 a.m., it would send a good morning message. Then 3 days later in the evening, it would send hope I caught you after work message. I'm about to leave my desk, but I got another hour. That got them up to like a 25% conversion. And then we added in calls. And that's about the time I actually brought in my co-founder, said, hey man, I need you to rebuild this because it's kind of a leaning tower of crap, right? Like I'm not a great programmer by any means. So that's why I partnered with Anthony. I was always the visionary and he was always the integrator. So he rebuilt the whole system, realized very quickly that a lot of these people, the majority actually, were texting us back, right? And that's when we kind of fell into this conversational AI idea, because we're looking at what people are saying and they're saying like, well, call me now, or I can't talk, or I'm at work, or how much does it cost? Or they're saying, don't call me. And then we'd call them, or they'd say, call me back now. And we wouldn't call them for another day. So it's really bad user experience. So we built a chat room. We just staffed a couple people, again, thinking lean, right? We didn't start with a hardcore AI, natural language processing, machine learning, robot. We just started with two people that were, copying, pasting common responses from a spreadsheet. And then eventually we started training the system. If they said I'm busy, they could click the I'm busy button. Then we started training it to say like anytime they clicked anything that meant I'm busy, it would start building a dictionary. So now we've had, I think since then we've had, I don't even know what it is, 62 million, something like that, human trainings to our dictionary. So effectively, we know all the which ways to say I'm driving, all the which ways to say I'm at work, all the ways to say no or stop, including, the middle finger emoji, right? Like, and that's the level of autonomy you got to get to be able to hold a completely humanized conversation. We're in a great place when it comes to competitors because we're the only ones that have been doing it at this big of a scale for this long. So we just have all that data, again, back to the Tesla thing, they have more cars driving on the roads, right? So somebody has to come up with a system that is so much better than theirs that the data isn't worth it. But it's terribly hard to do. A lot of startups, I think, they raise money and they hire data scientists and machine learning experts and they don't have any data. We started by executing, and even we're just now starting to scratch the surface on moving from a deterministic model to a probabilistic model and doing much more with data science and machine learning and whatnot. But we only can do that because we've had 550 million conversations at this point.
Right. This concept of conversational texting, how has that idea just kind of evolved over the years? And you talked about competition. Like, what is this brand consumer relationship management, lead generation, and conversion just market kind of look like today? And where does conversational texting kind of fit in?
I think conversational texting is really applicable for high consideration items or for enterprises that have audiences that are otherwise stuck, meaning like, somebody that is going to get kicked off of Medicaid because they didn't pay their bill, or somebody that needs to return their at-home test, to get accurate readings, or somebody needs to renew their auto insurance policy or they're going to lapse. These are things that happen all the time, right? Like people just don't pick up the phone when these enterprises are calling them, or they're not carefully combing through their direct mail anymore. They're sure as heck not seeing every email, right? It's, everybody's inundated with email. So that's where I think it's really applicable. It's not so much applicable for, Stern forgot to buy the socks that he left in his shopping cart, right? Like that's more direct response. That's more like just send a push text maybe and just say, hey, were you still interested? We'll give you 20% off. You don't need to like hold a humanized conversation, answer buyer questions and bring somebody down a buyer's journey for some socks. But you probably do for, a mortgage loan or, healthcare or renewing your auto insurance or whatnot. So it's more the considered purchases, I think.
Yeah. And that's something that you have learned over time, or was there experimentation with these different kinds of conversations?
We just kind of fell into it. There was a time where we would try anything. We were doing stuff for politicians, shopping cart re-engagements, app downloads, all kinds of stuff. And you start to realize like through pattern recognition, okay, we've had whatever it is, a couple hundred clients and we got 60 that are great, like what makes these the same? You start to break them apart and look at ideal client profile and figure out what it is about them that makes them the same, or about the projects that make it worthwhile. Like we've done, welcome messages and happy anniversary messages, but they don't move the needle enough. It's not a big enough problem to solve. It's not a terribly difficult thing to automate. So those projects always kind of failed, but these more high consideration, high value, pivotal moments for consumers with servicing companies seem to be like really where we have our sweet spot. And there's other companies that focus on e-com. Attentive is a great one, very large, very great at what they do in shopping cart re-engagement, but it's a different thing. It's like, that's really more direct response. They don't need to have, completely humanized conversation. They just need to be able to stay in front of consumers and keep brand awareness where it should be.
Yeah. So what does Drips look like today? What is the extent of kind of the product offerings? How many folks are you working with, and just kind of the scale at which you're operating today?
We have, I don't even know how many clients we have now, a lot, not like thousands. It's a managed technology. So it's bigger companies. So it's, 7 or 8 dozen of, some of the largest either enterprises in the world or the agencies that service those enterprises. We have 125 employees currently, up from 4 in 2016.
Yeah.
The system, just for idea for scale, I think right now it's holding around 8.5 million concurrent conversations. Right about now, still 6 o'clock, it's probably doing 180 or so touch points per second. So every single second, there's 180 messages going in or coming out. And that's about it.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah, it's cool. It's an interesting problem to solve, because like there's a reason why your local insurance agent can get a hold of you. It's because it's a person, and they can act like a person. They can call and they can leave voicemail, and they can send you a text, they can follow up with an email, and they can do what they need to do to get a hold of you. And you can then tell them, hey, I'm busy, AC, try me at 6, and then they'll try you at 6. The problem and the opportunity, and this goes back to scaling the unscalable, is like, how does an enterprise staff 100,000 of those people, 100,000
Right.
mortgage loan officers, 100,000 insurance agents? It's impossible. The math doesn't back out. That's why we have a successful business. Is we can give the enterprise that one-to-one scalability and performance, so that to the consumer, it looks human and feels human without the cost of staffing a full-time employee.
At what point in the journey from when you started to where you are today, do you transition away from that kind of mechanical Turk model, and then like where someone behind the scenes is kind of acting as an AI, acting as a human?
It's just when you have the right confidence scores, like you can't. If you get to a point where a consumer could tell it's a bot, you've lost, right? So like that's to me is the other competition is chatbots. Technically, you could argue that Drips is a chatbot, but if you can't tell it's a bot, to me it's something else, right? To me it's this
You passed the Turing test.
I mean, who knows? But the point is, like, if I text something, it says respond M for more information and I or P for price or R to reschedule, I know that's a bot, right? But if it's like, hey, Jeffrey, did you have any more questions? Yeah, well, I'm curious how much it costs. Oh, great question. Yeah, it actually costs this much. Could we touch base later on tonight? No, I'm busy. I'm at work. Oh, sorry, I caught you at work, man. How's tomorrow look? I'm in the office till 6. Like, if you look like that, it's not chatbot. And I don't think consumers want to chat with chatbots. I think it's a pretty poor user experience. So again, it kind of goes back to the data, right? Like, I have to have seen the message, I'm stuck in a meeting at the office, at least a couple times, or human program that in to build that dictionary to be able to handle that response with a 99 to 100% confidence score. You can use fuzzy logic, but then it gets bad. You start to lower your thresholds, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, I'm at work and not interested. And they see I'm at work as the heavier weighted thing. And they say, oh, sorry, we caught you at work. We'd love to tell you about, yada, yada, yada. So how you do it is by doing it. And that's kind of my point about getting the reps, right? Like, Teslas didn't drive themselves at first, right? People drove them. And then they started, adaptive cruise control. Then it started seeing stop signs, and it started stopping at stop signs. But you can't skip steps, right? You have to have the data in order to be able to leverage the data.
Yeah. When you think about the next steps, and maybe just to go on like a macro level detour here for a sec, but like when you think about AI and where like the rubber hits the road on that, how are you thinking about AI like internally at Drips, and then also more at an industry level? There are things that have come out recently. There's the whole GPT-3 model and really some like linguistic
Mhm.
capabilities for these AI things that really feel human on the other side.
No, there's a ton of cool stuff coming out. Like, I think at the end of the day, whoever can have a real, true probabilistic model when it comes to these types of conversations is in the best seat. And again, we're lucky to have been doing this for years and had hundreds of millions of conversations, because we should, by doing the right look backs and tagging our stuff appropriately, we should know how to hold a conversation with Jeffrey slightly different than AC, right? Even if it's the same area, but I'm a little older or whatever, so like the lingo that I might like is a little different than yours, or I might like emojis and you might not, so a lot of it is about moving from a deterministic model, meaning, okay, all the people in this bucket get this conversation and all the people in this bucket get that conversation. It's more like, think like Optimizely, right? Where you go to the landing page and just because of what it knows about you or people that look like you, it changes the whole site in a probabilistic manner versus a deterministic one. So that, I think, is what's next for us. What's next for AI? Who knows? It's I feel like that's like the most overused, buzz term ever.
Yes.
But, it doesn't mean it's not gonna eventually, eventually cars will fly, right? There was a really, really good talk Tim Urban did about AI, and it was spot on. It's like, everybody thinks it's not going to happen until it happens, right? Like, nobody thought AI would be able to beat a person in chess, but it did. And when it did, it was never beatable again, right? And then it was like, what was next? It was like poker, right? Texas Hold'em. They were like, well, an AI could never win in Texas Hold'em because there's human emotions, there's bluffing, there's this, there's that. It did take it a while, but when it did, it was not able to be caught, But the skills that AI has are generally, almost always, right? They're narrow, right? It's not like the poker playing AI is not going to win in chess, and the chess AI is not going to figure out how to drive your car. So, what a lot of people think about from the most macro level, the, God on earth AI or whatever, is a general intelligence that I haven't seen anything that says it's coming anytime soon, but when it does, it'll be interesting. That's why I'm nice to my Alexa and Siri, and, that way they remember me when they start to take over.
Yeah, no, that resonates. I'm sure they're listening in right now.
That's right. We love you. We love you, Alexa.
Well, one thing that I am curious about, because I think we've covered a good deal, like how you've thought about scaling technically the organization, just kind of the natural progression that you've gone through to get where you are today. But from the business perspective, I know that Drips is now one of the fastest growing companies in North America. And, tell me where I'm wrong here, but I'm not sure, like, from the beginning that, you necessarily did you know that you would be getting as big as you are getting? And like, how do you think about just scaling the company and the organization and the culture that comes with what you've done on the technical side?
Yeah. Carefully, I would say, like, I think we've done a good job of defining a kind of a niche category, a new category. Maybe it's not as niche as, I used to think. But this idea of, automated humanized conversations at scale, it's a big solution that a lot of people can use. And the one thing that, let me back up, and we have such a lead on the market that it's ours to mess up, right? But so what's important to me is keeping that lead, right? The remaining first and becoming the Marketo of conversational AI, or the Uber of conversational AI or whatever. But when you think about it, like, Uber wasn't first, right? There was Magic Taxi before Uber. There was Lotus Notes before Salesforce. There was BlackBerry before iPhone. So oftentimes it's not the market leader or the market innovator that wins, because all the competitors get to catch up very quickly. They can look at what Drips is doing and they can emulate very quickly without having to go through the years of suffering and pain that we did to get to where we're at. But that's why we took on a funding partner with Excel KKR. So I think we did it at the right time. I think we're at the right size. They are specifically a B2B SaaS technology investor. So they've done, I don't know, 200 or 300 different deals like this, where their pattern recognition will help us speed up even further, right? Like, they're not investing in B2C companies, are not investing in manufacturing companies, they invest in technology companies. So that's how we speed up. And, for me, it's really ours to mess up at this point. I think the thing that I'm very cognizant and careful about, and my whole team is taking the prudent steps and not trying to go too fast, right? And that's the trick. It's all timing, right? It's like if we would have invested into healthcare 2 years ago, it would have been a waste of money. It wouldn't have been ready. But if we would have invested in auto insurance next year, we'd have been too late. So it's all timing, and just trying to adjust the throttle and be very thoughtful with being very iterative. I mean, my whole C-suite, we still meet every couple of weeks and talk through every single new hire, every single one, and adjust and stack rank and, move things around as market changes. I think a lot of people get too hung on to best laid plans, and then they look up and they're off, or they're above their skis, or they didn't invest quick enough, or whatever it may be. So I think just being thoughtful,
Yeah. What are some of the other things that worry you or concern you?
I used to be concerned about call center softwares. Honestly, there's a lot of, very, very well-funded multi-billion-dollar companies, Genesis, Avaya, Five9, NICE, and Contact. They should be the ones that are innovating where we are, but I just haven't seen it. Or it's a little odd because or it makes sense because they're on like generally a per seat model where they charge and make more money the bigger the call center, where we're more into like efficacies and shrinking down call centers and acting as a hybrid to them, so they used to keep me up. I mean, there's a ton, and laws could change, right? Regulatory environments could change. Phones could change, phones could start to act more like email, which won't be surprising. I mean, I'm sure you've seen the report junk button, and
yes.
Even if it's, even if you just apply for Liberty Mutual and you got a text, if enough people click report junk, it's going to start getting treated like junk. They got to crowdsource it. So I think past a lot of that stuff, because again, I come from a marketing background. So I'm always worried about creating the best conversation we can for the consumers in a very, very contextual way. And that will always win. If you blast people right now and you send a bunch of spam or, robocalls or push messaging out, you're going to have a terribly difficult time getting to the audience you're trying to connect with. But if you have real people who the clients have the right consents and they're reaching out for the right reasons at the right time with the right message, and they're able to actually hold a humanized conversation, that's great. Like that's where you want to be, So I don't know. What scares me? Hiring the wrong people. I mean, I think that's always in a fast growth thing, especially leadership. You get the wrong person in the wrong seat, and they come in and they disrupt the culture, or at best case, they slow you down a lot because you didn't put the right person in the right seat. Culture at scale is tough. It's different. We used to have a nice small headquarters with a private chef and arcade games and, really just a super cool place, especially for Akron. And now we're 130 people across the United States, and it's different, so figuring out how to scale remote culture is tough. The coronavirus, like that sucks, right? Like we're B2B, big contract software sales. Usually our teams are belly to belly, right? Like that's what I jokingly call B2B, belly to belly. They're in the room, working with their executive sponsors, and like that's just not a reality now. So I think that slowed us down a lot as far as getting market adoption. But that's the same stuff that everybody's dealing with. So I wouldn't say it scares me as much as those are the challenges.
The challenges. How have you thought about the scaling of the culture? Going from 4 people to hundreds. That is quite a transformation.
Yeah, I mean, luckily we have some great people. Katie, who has been with us, I think she was like our 6th or 7th employee from the beginning, and she's really owned culture, and I still work with her a lot on it, but a lot of stuff. I mean, the way we hire, the way we fire, the way we do performance reviews, like the core values are 50%, I think, of somebody's performance review, which is, what dictates if they get more money or not. We have, I think at the most macro level, I've realized that you can't just get people in the same room and rile them up. I mean, we used to have microphones and PA systems and all kinds of super cool stuff. That just doesn't exist now. So I realized that since you can't do it with these like larger groups, you got to do it and you got to build the same fabric, but in a one-to-one relationship, right? So we have mentorship programs, buddy programs, core value winners, crowdsourced, scoring of people and calling out good work, and interest groups. And I mean, we have like an interest group for we have like a Taylor Swift interest group, right, on Teams or Slack or whatever. So like all the people that love Taylor Swift can talk about Taylor Swift. We have clubs, right? Fitness clubs, wine clubs, sports clubs, and they all have real budgets, So like the wine group gets together once a month and virtually, and, we have a virtual sommelier, and they, do wine tasting. We have a book club that sends out books. So I think you have to give people the tools and the avenues to connect one-to-one, and kind of make room for those same conversations that would have otherwise happened over lunch or at the water cooler, right? But without creating those spaces for that and budgeting the time and the money for it, it won't happen. You end up with a very meritocracy, culture, which, some companies that's great for, but I think when you're trying to build, you gotta, people really gotta want to lean in and get in the same boat together.
Yeah. When you think about owning the conversational texting market, what is like the impact with that you kind of hope to accomplish with Drips?
Unpack that question a little bit. What kind of impact? I mean, I can imagine a few. A financial,
yeah. Like what are, like when you're looking back 20 years from now and reading or 30, whatever it is, and you're reading about Drips and the story of Drips and kind of the impact that it's had on the industry and the space. Like what do you hope that is?
I hope we were the people that brought conversational AI really to life, and it's a cool thing to imagine that an insurance agent could hold conversations, through a system like Drips with thousands of their clients versus doing it by hand, So like, to me, it's about, being first, remaining first, and being the market dominator in that, in our specific space. Like I said, there's other companies that do a great job with direct response stuff, but I think for ours, it's allowing all consumers to engage with brands on a one-to-one basis, right? Personalized, one-to-one, on the consumer's time. It's not intrusive. It's polite. And I think it just makes for a better economy, better user experience. I don't have to worry about radio ads stopping me from doing what I want, or interstitials, or direct mail, or email, or call centers, or billboards, or all these other kind of push methodologies. The brand can reach out to me and ask me when it's a good time, and I'll either say next Thursday at 2, or I'll say never. And like that's a much better user experience for me, and it's a big cost saver for the brand. So I think for me, mostly it's just like being that sales force of it. Like, I've had 25 or 35 different projects and businesses, and a handful of them had real potential to scale. I see that now as I look back on my career, but most entrepreneurs, specifically bootstrapped ones, don't get the chance to build something that we've been able to build that can really be it easily could be a multi-billion-dollar company. It's got all the makings for it.
That's very exciting. I'm curious, before we kind of work towards the closing questions here, what have been some of the most like niche or innovative applications of conversational texting?
Oh man, there's a lot. We're doing something now. I don't think I'm even allowed to say the company name or the product name, but it's at-home poop tests. That's a big one that I'm pretty excited about. I'm excited for the emoji use on that campaign. That's probably my favorite one. Helping nurses,
that's pretty good.
Helping nurses get people signed up for patient care coordination, like somebody that's pre-diabetic, like getting them on a health plan so that they don't end up in the hospital. Again, it's a great thing for the consumer, great thing for the hospitals, great thing for the payers. We've tried for a couple COVID things with some of the big pharmacies and didn't get to win that business. That would have been nice. Yeah, I think a lot of like the healthcare stuff and like the patient care coordination stuff, I think is, for me, it's super impactful, and for us as a business, everybody gets sick, right? Like, so the whole country is a target audience at that point, right? If we can get into the payers and the insurers and the healthcare plans and whatnot.
I imagine there is a breadth. That's a lot though. Cool. Well, we'll work towards our closing question here, which is uniform for everyone that's come on, and we're essentially building a collage of not necessarily people's favorite things in the in the Northeast Ohio area, but of the hidden gems or things that other people may not necessarily know about that you value?
Oh, that's a good one. It's funny. I get, like I like Cleveland as much as the next guy, but I'm such an Akron person. Like there was a point before the pandemic where I swear I got to New York more often than I got to Cleveland. It's just like Akron people are just weird, not that, I think most Midwesterners are to some degree, but Cleveland, love the Velvet Tango Room. They're under new ownership now, but I haven't seen it drop off at all. It's a really, really super, super yummy crafted cocktail type joint in Tremont. And also in Tremont actually is Ginkgo, which is like, I think probably the best, some of the best sushi I've ever had in my life. And I've eaten sushi all over the world. And it's right there, in Tremont. It's a little bitty, maybe 12 top, something like that. Super, super, super small sushi bar. But they're killer if you're a sushi person.
Yeah, they're fantastic. Yeah. Awesome. Well, yeah, AC, I really very much appreciate you coming on and sharing your story here. It was very cool to learn about Drips, and really just the extraordinary growth and progress that y'all are making in the market. It's awesome.
Great. Well, I appreciate your time, Jeffrey, or Stern. I don't know what you would like to go by, but appreciate it either way.
Stern's just my last name.
Got it. Okay, cool. Yeah, man. Well, I'll see you around Cleveland.
Yeah, absolutely. If folks have anything that they would like to follow up with you about, or whatever it may be, where's the best place for them to reach you?
My email is AC as in Aaron Christopher @drips.com. Drips.com is a great place to learn more about us and what we do and who we do it for. We put out a ton of content and thought leadership on the subject. But yeah, email is always easy.
Excellent. Well, AC, thank you again. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, man.
That's all for this week. Thank you for listening. We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's show. So if you have any feedback, please send over an email to jeffrey@layoftheland.fm or find us on Twitter @podlayoftheland or @sternhefe, JEFE. If you or someone you know would make a good guest for our show, please reach out as well and let us know. And if you enjoy the podcast, please subscribe and leave a review on iTunes or on your preferred podcast player. Your support goes a long way to help us spread the word and continue to bring the Cleveland founders and builders we love having on the show. We'll be back here next week at the same time to map more of the land. The Lay of the Land podcast was developed in collaboration with the Up Company LLC. At the time of this recording, unless otherwise indicated, we do not own equity or other financial interests in the company which appear on this show. All opinions expressed by podcast participants are solely their own and do not reflect the opinions of any entity which employs us. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.